Thank you, Puck and Boudewijn. So, how would you feel if your name and face would be displayed on a large screen at a crossroad for everybody to see because you didn't stop for the red traffic light? And how would you feel if you know your personal credit score moves down when you buy too many video games or when you smoke in non-smoking zones? Would you still do it? And how would you feel if you know your fellow citizens may report you to the local authorities because they have an app called 老赖地图 and it detects people who have debts within 500-meter radius, but you look like you are capable of paying that debt? Would you still wear your Rolex? I guess we can all agree that this kind of examples make us feel very uncomfortable. And that is why such news dominates the headlines of our newspapers. Our newspapers. I've been coming to China for almost 20 years now. I speak the language, like Puck said. I deal with a lot of Chinese people on a daily basis. And in my role as an intermediary between European and Chinese organizations, I try to approach disputes from different perspectives. Our perspective and the Chinese perspective. And I find that it's not only language barriers and distance that makes it complex. I see on the ground of factories all the way up to the boardrooms that disputes occur due to lack of insight on the different perspective. And that's why I'm here today. I would like to create some awareness about these different perspectives. Whether you're speaking with an American, a German, or a Chinese person, we all have different histories, different backgrounds, which brings different perspectives. To mention one official disclaimer, I'm not here to share my personal opinion about what's happening in China. And of course, we cannot classify all Chinese as one type of person. I would just like to tell you a story about this matter, and maybe that will shine some new light on it. So the technological developments in China, like artificial intelligence, AI, and facial recognition, tighten control over people's lives. Yet I meet a lot of Chinese people who feel very comfortable. In fact, they're very proud of these developments. They tell me they feel free as a bird. So that makes me wonder, how come? How is that possible? Well, to understand this, we need to approach this matter from a Chinese perspective. So please join me, hop on the plane, and let's fly to China. Let's go to not Beijing, not Shanghai, let's travel to Dingxi, an agricultural town in the northwest of China. 2.5 million inhabitants, and we travel to the home of the young father, Liu. He just arrived there for the celebration of Chinese New Year, seeing his wife and his daughter for the first time in 2 years. Because he works in the south of China, 1,700 kilometers away, where he works as a stock picker in a big warehouse. Mr. Liu, like 900 million fellow citizens in China, has WeChat installed on his app. With this app, he communicates with his beloved ones, he transfers parts of his salary to his wife, he orders food, but he also books doctor's appointments and gets on subways. In other words, WeChat is our WhatsApp, Facebook, Tiki, Uber, Booking.com, you name it, Deliveroo, it's all gathered in this one super app. If you want to be part of Chinese society, you need to have WeChat on your phone. And you can imagine that this service provider gathers a lot of relevant information about its users. They know that Mr. Liu is 33 years old. They know he lives in Dingxi, but spends most of his time in Guangzhou, where he works. They also know he has only 3,900 RMB on his bank account. Not enough to treat his friends on the expensive dinners, but he does do that. And they know his spicy food is his favorite food. And very important, they can see that he booked a doctor's appointment last week because of his aching back, because of the hard work in the factory. I'm not sure whether Mr. Liu will get a health insurance covered in China. Nevertheless, Mr. Liu himself is very optimistic, and he really enjoys this app and all the technologies that come with it. To understand his point of view, we need to understand where he comes from. Mr. Liu lives in a low-trust society. Basically, most Chinese people distrust one another when you don't know each other. That's why cold calling doesn't work in China. They hang up the phone before you finish your first sentence. You need your personal relations. If you don't have them, you may be treated as scam. I even tell my clients, like, you need to take out 2 more days of your agenda when you travel to China to get to know your business partner. I tell them, go climb a mountain, walk through the park, I don't mind. Just make sure you build a personal relation. That relation, your guanxi, is very important. If you have that well established, you know that future challenges in your business can be solved much more easily. So the reasons for this distrust, there are many, but one of them is the fact that the Chinese market is an emerging market. But the emergence is at such large pace and at such great scale that has never been seen before. And even the social security system cannot keep up. So it's not fully in place yet. With 300,000 criminals on the loose, things happen. Like criminals selling gutter oil like collected from waste streams, sold to restaurants as if it's new oil. It's toxic. People get very sick. This is one of the challenges the Chinese government is dealing with. And it will not be the first time that maybe you travel as a sales manager to China. You're invited by Mr. Wang, who has a very promising contract. You want to sign with him. And upon arrival, he asks you to buy some gifts for his boss. And you buy a nice watch and some drinks, some cigarettes maybe. And once you're back home with your signed contract, you find out that Mr. Wang's boss does not exist, nor does the company he works for. But Mr. Wang, however, has a very nice watch now. So you can imagine that it's very important to have those personal relationships to get things done in China. And maybe now you also understand why a lot of Chinese people support the Chinese government using technologies to make the Chinese society a safer place. Mr. Liu likes living in harmony. I mean, all of us do, right? Harmony is nice. But harmony in China has a different meaning. When Liu was a little boy, he wore a blue uniform with a little red scarf. And every morning, he and his classmate would go to the schoolyard to do some exercise, after which the rest of the day was basically learning in the classroom and rehearsing poems and novels, often out loud, en masse. And this typical traditional style of education is heavily influenced by a philosopher called Confucius. Confucius' thoughts have been the backbone of China's education system for over 2,000 years. Originating from 500 before Christ, it has a longer history than our Christianity. Just to realize that for a moment. Confucius said, "Obey your masters. Listen to your teacher. Listen to your parents. Listen to the government and follow the rules. Know your place in society, and there will be social order, and that will result in a harmonious living environment." When we ask critical questions to our teachers, that's not something being frowned upon. In fact, we are stimulated to do so. We're pushed out of the box. We need to make the impossible possible. And if we fail, we get up and we try again. For Mr. Liu, that is slightly different. He has been taught to follow the rules, listen to his teacher, work hard and excel in what he does. Mr. Liu lives in a collectivistic society, meaning that the interests of the group are emphasized over the interests of him as an individual. In fact, Mr. Liu is just a small element, a pupil of a greater whole, his class. He's just a small element, a son of a greater whole, his family. And Mr. Liu is just a small element, an individual today, of a greater whole, the Chinese society. So maybe you can imagine that knowing he cannot influence the course of life, combined with the economical phase he's living in, he'd rather focus on securing income for his family, working hard. And when he has free time, he has a beer with his friends, making jokes. But these things should be positive and happy things. He even went on a holiday a few years ago with his family to travel to a scenic spot, the Yellow Mountain in central China. That was a first for him. So you can imagine that also Mr. Liu really supports the establishment of the social order, because that is what he's been taught and that is what he's used to. Also, by doing so, Mr. Liu is sharing all kinds of data with service providers. And he says, for me, that's okay. I have nothing to hide. My face won't be on that screen on the crossroad. I'm a good citizen. In fact, privacy is not an issue for Mr. Liu. Do you know that still today in China there are many toilets with no door? And this is no joke. So privacy to us is something we strongly defend because we cherish our individualism. Privacy is about trust. But in China, most parents, towards their children, for example, see privacy as a way of keeping secrets. So when Mr. Liu was a small boy and he would just be in his bedroom closing the door while his parents would sit in the living room, his parents may think he has something to hide. And that in China is a bad thing. It may also have to do with the fact that privacy, 隐私 in Chinese, means seclusion and implies secrecy. So knowing that most Chinese people have a different view upon privacy, this also means that they easily adopt new technologies, and sharing their data in return for discount or for user friendliness is easily done. So last Sunday, maybe you had a nice cappuccino and you were reading an article written by Western journalists approaching this matter from a Western perspective. You would think, why on earth do Chinese people embrace these technologies and letting this happen to themselves? Well, now you know. Maybe some of you have been to China, the booming cities, Beijing or Shanghai or Shenzhen. But that's just a small part of China. A lot of things that are for granted to us are not for granted to many Chinese. If you become ill today, you know the best doctors will take good care of you. And if you have a car accident, you know you can calmly fill out your insurance forms because you have a backup. And if you book a restaurant today, you don't have to worry about becoming ill tomorrow. For many Chinese, that's not the case. So in my work, I experienced how important it is to gain insight in the other perspective. And I do so by asking questions, not to judge. And those answers are not to justify what's happening, but it's just to gather information. And based on that information, I can build my strategy and I can choose how to move forward. I learned that a harmonious society, hierarchical society, a different view on trust, and a different view on privacy are three elements that explain why Chinese people embrace technologies like these that we maybe disgrace and still feel free as a bird. Thank you.